Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Automotive Talent Show Podcast, the podcast where we get to know and gain insights from leaders within the automotive industry. My guest this week comes to us from Sydney and has a strong exposure to the industry from both the OEM and retail side of the business, and has also got his own podcast, which we'll dig into a little bit today as well. Welcome to the Automotive Talent Show, Johnny Yap. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Cameron?
I'm very well, mate. Thank you for being a part of it, and yeah, I've been looking forward to this chat. So,
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm quite excited to see where it all goes. You're you're obviously more experienced at doing this than I am, but I think these are all great conversations and meaningful, and I think your experience can definitely give some great insights into the beautiful industry that we call automotive.
Thank you.
So, from a high level, I suppose, Johnny, give us the grand tour of the Johnny Yap experience. So,
okay, so from I guess if we talk about the automotive side first, because that's probably more towards the niche that you're targeting. I started in the industry, I think it was 2004, and how it was quite odd how I ended up starting in the automotive industry. But essentially, what happened was I was studying at university. So I was studying law and engineering science at UTS, so University of Technology in Sydney. And basically, what happened was that I think it was the summer of my second year or something like that. I was just looking through the local paper, and in that local paper, in the job section, I saw that there was apprentices wanted at the local Toyota dealership. And for me, actually, back then, I always actually had a bit of a passion for Toyota cars. Thinking back to, the old school style, Toyota sports cars, the A86, the Supras, the Chasers, those sorts of cars. And so when I saw that ad, I was like, I kind of need a job. My parents, my mum was overseas at that point in time, dealing with some personal issues. So, I was sort of, fending for myself from that regard. So I went to the local Toyota dealer, and the receptionist there, her name was Cami, and I gave her my resume, and I said, look, Cami, I'm not sure if your boss would be interested in someone like me. I can probably only commit to a part-time because I am studying at university. But if he's interested, give me a call. So then I think I heard nothing for about 4 weeks. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess nothing's really going to happen there. And then I get a phone call. And so I pick up the phone, and what I hear on the other line is, Johnny Yap, my name is Mark Fitzgerald. I'm the owner of Castle Hill Toyota.
Yeah.
Tell me, why do you want to be a mechanic? That was his first question. And and so little did I know, that we were having a phone interview at that point in time. And so I said to him, look, just because, I start there doesn't mean that that's where I end up. I think, to be successful at anything, you've got to start somewhere. And so I looked at it as that was an entry-level position to really get some experience. And then who knows where it was going to go from there. And I think, what I said must have resonated with him because, from his, I guess, in his story, that's how he started in the industry as well as an apprentice, and obviously grew himself to where he is today. And he basically said to me at the end of the conversation, I'm going to give you a job, come in and we'll go from there. And so it was quite interesting, like when I think back on it now, that I went in to the dealership thinking, I guess, we're having a proper face-to-face interview, and I was going to get walked around. And Mark had already gone and said to all these people that, this is Johnny Yap. He's studying at uni. He's this whiz kid that's starting in our business. So I would have been, 19 or 20 at that point in time. 20. I think I was around 20 at that stage. So when you actually go into that and have, I guess, all these people, thinking that you're the next great thing or whatever, it actually, in some instances probably hurt some of my relationships in that business. And it's not to say I think people felt threatened, but more that, they already think that you're like this upstart. And then, something happens or it doesn't go the right way. People are always looking for a reason to put the blame on you or say, you know, oh, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. When at the end of the day, irrespective of, you know, what your experience or whatever else might be, mistakes can happen. You
Absolutely.
know, so that was so that's how I started in the industry. So back then, you know, it was my days were, I would say that was probably one of the toughest times of my life because I was, you know, at work almost a full 38 hours a week. 30 hours plus TAFE, so one day at TAFE, doing a full-time uni workload, training martial arts, you know, 5 times a week. So, and that became my life. Like I did that for about 4 years. So I managed to, with TAFE, so normally the TAFE side of things is you know, takes you through, I managed to finish TAFE in 2 years. So back then, there was 2 options when it came to TAFE. You could either do the classroom learning or there was a self-paced version. So I opted for the self-paced version because the way I looked at it is that, you know, if I can finish that as quickly as possible, then I can spend more time on the floor and, you know, I guess give back a little bit to Mark as well for him giving me that opportunity. I think from his perspective, he probably saw me as a bit of a guinea pig for his own son, Ben, who's also in his business now.
Yes.
So Ben did a very similar thing to me, you know, did the uni thing and did his trade at the same time. And then I guess, you know, how my next sort of opportunity came up from there was that Mark actually came to me one day and he said, you know, Johnny, I'm happy to keep you in my business and I'm happy to, you know, give you a pathway that we can grow you on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, why don't you go to Toyota Motor Corporation and see what you can do there? And I was like, okay, well, you know, happy to try anything really. And so what happened, I think, I don't remember the year, but it was probably, actually, it should have been around 2006. 2006 or maybe 2007. And one of those years, the dealership actually won the President's Award Trophy. So John Economos was there. All the big wigs from Toyota were there. And Mark actually came and grabbed me out of the workshop, you know, and here I was in my workshop gear. And he said, Johnny, I wanted to introduce you to a few people. Introduced me to JC and a few of the other guys. And basically said, Johnny, when you finished your time, we'll get you a job, you know, over there. Basically, yeah, the day that I finished my uni degrees and I was graduating, and I said to Mark, you know, I finished. He said, oh, look, what I want you to do is I want you to email this guy. So he gave me Alan Porrich's email. Alan's no longer with us, but Alan at the time was the divisional manager of customer services division. And basically I sent my resume off. Didn't hear anything for probably, you know, 4 to 6 weeks as well. And I thought, oh, well, you know.
Chalk that up to experience.
Yeah, that was it. And then I got a phone call and I had, I think it was Chris O'Connor who rang me to call me in for an interview. And so basically there was a new role that they've put together in service operations. So I guess an entry-level style role. And so, you know, I went in for that. And it was one of those experiences where, you know, I got put on the spot. And Chris said to me, you know, Johnny, you know, how good are you with Excel? And I said, oh, I'm okay. I don't know, really. Like,
how good is anyone with Excel, really? I don't think there's any genius level Excel operator out there. We all know what we know, don't we?
Exactly. And then and you don't know what you don't know because unless you really use the system.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Chris sort of put me on the spot and he said, oh, you know, Johnny, I want you to go and pull out, you know, a set of values for me for everything that matches this. So at the time, you know, I didn't know what a VLOOKUP was. I didn't know these.
I still don't, by the way.
I didn't know any of these basic Excel functions. Yeah. And so, you know, I think Chris said, I'll give you about, you know, 10, 15 minutes to work it out. So then Chris left the room and there I was frantically, you know, searching through and basically manually doing it all, right? And so, and then Chris came back into the room and he goes, oh, have you finished? And I said, yep, it's done. And then he's had a look and he's gone, he's probably trying to look at my formulas and there was no formula, but the answer was right. And he goes, how did you do this, Johnny? I said, well, I just did it manual. And he goes, he sort of giggled to himself and he was like, oh, wasn't really what we were looking for. We're actually looking for you to do a VLOOKUP. And I was like, oh, well, might be good if I actually knew what a VLOOKUP was. And he proceeded to tell me. And so I left that interview thinking, oh, well, there goes that opportunity.
You chalked that one up to experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think that was on I think what happened was that was on a Monday. And then basically I got called up on the Wednesday for another interview. And then actually by the Friday, so Friday afternoon, I was back at the dealership working, and then Max Endicott, the service manager, he came and grabbed me, and Max said, oh, Johnny, Mark wants to speak with you. So, Mark's on the phone to me, and Mark was actually telling me I got the job before Toyota had actually called me to get the job. And I do remember this conversation very vividly because, I said to Mark, I don't know how to thank you, like you've done so much for me in my career. And he said to me, Johnny, you don't need to thank me or do anything. All you need to do is just remember where you came from. And he said, you don't owe me anything. You can pack up your tools. You can leave today and go and start at Toyota next week or whatever it was. And that's how I started at Toyota. So I think, yeah, so I think I got the dates wrong. I think I started in 03 at the dealership. And then I went to Toyota in 06 because that was when I finished uni, etc.
Yeah. And
so I started my career at Toyota. So spent 5 years at Toyota, got lots of experience in a whole range of different departments. I think in my first 2 years, I'd been rotated every 6 months. So basically, started in service operations, then went to what they called custom services division, so after sales, and then after sales over to franchise development, and then franchise development over to the region. And then I spent, the last 2 or 3 odd years in the region as a district sales manager there. And then, through, I guess, I think one of the themes that you're going to get out of my story is relationships. Just because obviously, it was through my relationship with Mark that I got the opportunity at Toyota.
Yes.
It was through the relationships that I generated at Toyota that I probably got majority of the other roles that I've had in my career. So, when I left Toyota, basically that was through my relationship with Rod Cullen, who's the dealer principal at Lander Toyota. So Lander Toyota is owned by AHG.
Yep.
And Rod, sort of said to me, Johnny, where's your head at? And so, at the time I sort of said, I said to myself that I was going to give Toyota 5 years of my life to work out, do I want to stay in corporate or do I want to come back out to retail? And obviously, at that 5 year mark, then, Rod was saying, to come and join him at AHG. So he introduced me to a few people there. And then I actually did have a conversation with Mark about it. And I said to Mark, what do you think I should do? And Mark was really good. He I still view Mark as a mentor. He gave me some good advice and just said, Johnny, you got to look at in the longer and bigger picture of things, where do you want your life to end up? And he basically, rehashed on his story of, starting as an apprentice and working in those businesses until he became a business owner. And that was the pathway that he chose, and with that pathway, there was sacrifices that he made. Mark was a very good golfer. And rather than pursue the golfing thing, he sacrificed the golfing thing to then, focus on his automotive career. Likewise, I guess I can say I did a similar thing with my own life. I'm really into my martial arts. I'm still really into my martial arts today.
Yes.
And I probably, didn't chase some of those things as hard as I should have, thinking that I need to focus on my career. And I think, this is where, sometimes, advice that you get, it all depends on the person, because I give very different advice to my team now when it comes to them and their hobbies. I think, back then everybody wants to talk about, I guess, this balance that you're trying to achieve. And so to get something good or get something really good at one end, you had to sacrifice the other end. I guess what I really focus on nowadays, I really like the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so for me to be good in different facets doesn't mean that I have to give up on certain things. It means that I need to understand how I can translate those skills into those other areas to reduce the learning time, to reduce the experience required by drawing on, those sort of stories and experiences that I've had. I can then try and use that to then pick up other things even quicker.
Yeah.
So, if anything, I think it's like that mindset where if you quit something, then you can quit anything. Like you can quit everything, right? Like, so you just become like how, I guess a quitter, what people say a quitter. So, so my whole mindset on that and how you chase those passion projects and your side sort of gigs has really shifted. I don't think that you have to give away something to be able to be successful at that and be successful in your career anymore. No. But that's something that I only learnt myself through experience. Whereas, I think back in when I was going through it all, that was probably the mindset you needed to have. So,
it's interesting, isn't it? And it's life. Life is a byproduct of our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
As you said before, you don't know what you don't know until you learn it. But from the common thread through your story, from how you started to now, and we'll get into the now in a little bit, but it's very much a byproduct of what the automotive industry in many ways has always been, isn't it? The automotive industry isn't about cars.
Yeah.
Like the cars, the cars are the campfire that people gravitate to, but it's always been about the people and the relationships that people have been able to forge over the years together. I remember my background. We were Ford dealers when I grew up, and I remember being a little fella, probably 6, 7, 8 years old, and getting introduced to a customer that purchased a vehicle for my grandfather 40 years prior, and have been doing that ever since, and getting their cars serviced ever since. So, it's the relationship that you build that's what makes our industry, I think. It makes it great. It makes the industry that it is. Also makes it very sustainable. But that's the thing about mentors, is that even though he was the guy that gave you that phone interview and said, "Why do you want to be an apprentice?" all the way through to now, I'm sure you could pick up the phone to Mark now and say, "Hey, how you going?" Talk through challenges, and it's
and that's one of the things I've been really fortunate in my career to have had some really good mentors, and even excuse me.
That's right.
It's not corona. I have actually been corona tested. We are in a bit of a hot spot, around the dealership here. So it's one of those things where, and it's funny when we talk about the automotive industry, like in the old days, right? Like, and I'm not even that old, but like, the mentality previously would have been, if you're a little bit sick, you suck it up, you turn up at work, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now it's, if someone mentions to me, I've got a sore throat, go home, see ya. I want you to go get tested, come back when you're right, So it's just funny how those things sort of change. But
absolutely.
Yeah, like, so I was just really fortunate that I've met so many great people, and I would credit that was one of my best learnings out of Toyota, was just the amount of people that I met as an area sales manager. Like, even so, if I think about the guys who were in my immediate team back when I was a DSM, there was Brad Cruz, there was Mark Booth, Andrew Savas, Michael Barris. All these guys are somewhere still in the automotive industry. Phil Sue, he's with I think he's with Inchcape at the moment. With him, there's a whole bunch of different guys that were all in our team, and they're all just great relationships. Like, I can pick up the phone, have a conversation with him. I was talking with Boothie the other night. Ben Hallwood, he's come on my podcast. He's still in the industry, but in a different facet. He's in like an aftermarket sort of space. But all these guys, we've formulated such good relationships that at any point in time you can talk to them. Vin, who was a manager at Lexus, is now overseas in Singapore. like I had a great relationship when I was in network development with Danny Miles, and Danny was, you know, a guy that, you know, I really look up to and respect. So I was just, you know, there's so many names. I don't want to just name drop everybody that I know, but
Yeah,
they've all had some sort of impact on my career.
absolutely. But that's
And
life, isn't it? That's life. That's, you know,
absolutely, yeah,
you know, you walk into a room with a point of view, someone else gives you a different perspective, and whether if you agree with it, you adopt that as your point of view. If you don't agree with it, you leave it when you walk out of the room, don't you? But either way, you've you know, you've had the benefit of that relationship and the interaction.
yeah. Well, see, so when I think about that, John Perdry, who was the service operations manager when I first started at Toyota, he gave me some really good corporate career advice. He said, you know, irrespective of who your manager is, whether they're a good manager or a bad manager, you've got one goal, and your goal is to do your job to the best of your ability. And if they're a bad manager, well, hopefully, because of the work that you've done, they get promoted or move somewhere else. And then if they're a good manager, they get promoted or move somewhere else. So
Yes.
the net goal is still the same. You know, you just need to continue to apply yourself. Whether they're a good person or a bad person, you just do the best that you can do. And I think, you know, that was very sound advice. And, you know, I think back on that now and I go, oh, that was great advice for when I started my career. And, you know, I guess, you know, when I talk about, you know, how Toyota influenced the rest of my career, even when I went to AHG, so that was through Rod Cullen, you know, again, had a great team there, you know, Chad, who's, you know, owns a whole bunch of businesses himself now.
Yeah, the great Chadwick. Everyone knows the great Chadwick.
Yep. And then I met, you know, a whole bunch of DPs, obviously in that network, in the AHG New South Wales network, you know, and I still talk to some of the guys quite regularly nowadays as well. And, you know, from there, when I actually, and we can talk about, you know, my Holden days, because, you know, I've got some, I guess, experiences that I'm more than happy to share, because I think as an operator, you know, when I first got to that sort of penultimate level, as a senior manager, you know, general manager, dealer principal type role, that was always something that I aspired to, and I just I never expected to get there when I did. You know, I thought it was something that it was going to happen maybe when I was like 32, and it happened when I was 28, and
Right.
and you know, that's a credit to Chad, because Chad was the one that said, you know, Johnny, you know, here's your shot. You wanted to be a DP. Well, you know, the gentleman that we've employed for this business has fallen over, so we're going to put you in as like as a temporary, you know, fill in. And if you make a go of it, then it becomes yours. So that's what happened, and so I ran that business for almost 4 years. But I think, you know, when I think of myself as an operator now versus me as an operator then, you know, for lack of a better word, I would shit all over myself.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the ability was probably, and the tenacity was probably the same. The difference is in, you know, where my focus is. So nowadays I'm so much more focused on my people, as opposed to focused on the result. I think back then it was because, you know, I was young, I just got given that opportunity. I was so focused on the result that it was almost like the result at any cost.
Yes.
And now for me, you know, my outlook's a little bit different, where, you know, all these things like that are numbers and results, they're all great. KPIs are great, but they're outcomes. And if you spend all your time worrying about the outcomes, they've already happened. It's like trying to rewrite history.
Yes.
It doesn't actually help you. All you can focus on now is actually the influence. And so, you know, if you've had a bad day today, well, what have you done to make tomorrow that better day, right? It's almost like, you know, when you, if you want to set yourself up for a good day tomorrow, let's say you even want to go to the gym tomorrow morning. Well, you don't stay up late. You don't, you know, try and pack your bag in a rush in the morning, because the chances of you getting it wrong and ending up not going, you don't have any momentum. Yeah. So, you know, to actually set yourself up to have a good day tomorrow, I'm going to prepare the night before. I'm going to pack my bags. I'm going to, you know, go to sleep early, have my alarm set. So all I need to do in the morning is literally get up, get in the car, and away I go. So, so likewise, I guess, in this business now, at MacArthur BMW, I've got my guys really thinking about, what are the inputs that we're trying to work on today to actually influence the result tomorrow. I think, in the past, a lot of people would make a big song and a dance of, we haven't, whether we sold a car or we didn't sell a car. I make a bigger song and a dance about, well, what was the activity? How many people have we spoken to? How many appointments have we generated from the sales side of things? How many bookings have we made? Because once the bookings are made, well, the work's there.
Yes.
But we've got to keep stacking it up for the future. So, they're just some of the things that I think, have my focus has really shifted over the course of my career. But yeah, so, when I left the Holden business, even the next opportunity that I jumped into, because I always wanted to get into prestige. And I guess not to be, rude or anything, but, Holden as a brand didn't really resonate with my friends and family. Not a lot of Asian, like, just being honest, not a lot of Asians.
Not their core demographic.
No, so I wasn't in their core demographic, and I can tell you a funny story that, obviously, I speak, Australian English, and I had a customer once turn up and basically said, "I'm here to see Johnny," and I said, "You're speaking to him," and he said, "You're not a Johnny," and it's one of those things where you go, "Okay, how do you take it?" But to me, it was water off its back. Like, I don't, it doesn't bother me. So yeah, when I left Holden, I took almost 6 months off, got married, went overseas, had a long trip, which was nice because I've never done that before. Ever since, I started working for Market Kasuhu Toyota, I never really took an extended holiday. So I did that, and, I was a bit burnt out as well, and I was thinking, oh, do I really want to keep doing this? Like, that's how I felt. And then again, my next opportunity came up through relationships. So there was a GSM role. So it was a step backwards, a general sales manager role at Mercedes-Benz in Wollongong. And one of the owners, Aaron Taylor at the time, his brother Ryan was a good mate of mine from when I was a DSM, and I was his DSM for Gunnedah Toyota.
Yeah.
So I ended up, pretty much got the job straight away. So I spent 5 years there working for Aaron and his father-in-law, Tom. And that was great because that actually reignited my passion for the automotive industry. I got back to basics in terms of, it's about customer experience. As a brand, Mercedes is very focused on the brand experience. And I really love that. And I managed to create some really great relationships with a lot of great clients who, were guys that were just, looking to buy Mercedes, and then we've become friends.
Yes.
Some of them I've had on my podcast, just because, we resonated. They had really good stories, and it wasn't like, you don't know their story when you first meet them, but, if you're genuine in your approach, then over time, you get that in return. So yeah, spent 5 years there, and then, essentially, I guess, how part of my reasons for leaving there was just, I think, I could sense there was something changing at that business. So I was looking for another opportunity, and again, through my Toyota relationships, MacArthur BMW were owned by the Clintons Motor Group. So the Cordova's family has a stake in this. And they're Toyota dealers who I met when I was in Toyota land. And so that's how, I ended up at MacArthur BMW.
Yeah, isn't it such a good story? And obviously your story is unique to you, and every person's pathway is definitely different, isn't it? But
yeah,
it's, I think, the thread that's gone all the way through your story is the depth of relationships that you have forged along the way that has helped your career keep growing and being sustainable and challenging for you. It all started back with someone onboarding you in a way that was probably, for the time, not the normal way. Not the here's our next apprentice and he's going to be a superstar, and mapping out your pathway and setting you up to success right from the right from day zero, through to now. It's just been something that's the momentum has kept on growing, and it's been a real sustainable long term approach, hasn't it? But
Yeah,
it all comes back to the relationships.
exactly, and it's when we talk about relationships, it's also people don't necessarily think about relationships the right way. Well, I guess maybe not to say the right way, but I guess my take on the relationship is not what I can get out of a relationship; it's what I can give into that relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, because Mark was so good for me in my career, when I was working for him, I wanted to do the best that I could do, right? And likewise, when I was at Toyota, I had Toyota's best interest at heart. So much so that I was so much on the corporate side that sometimes you clash heads with some of the dealers, right? And then likewise, when I went to ASG, I was so focused on the result, and that was because I wanted to do the best for Chad, because Chad had given me such a great opportunity. I didn't want to let him down.
Yes.
Right? And then when I went to Mercedes, I wanted to do the best for the brand. I wanted to offer the best experience. I wanted to get the best result for the dealership. I was fortunate that we managed to grow the business to almost nearly 2.5 times the volume in a very short period of space. So likewise, when I came across to BMW, it was interesting. Like from that perspective, like they're both German companies, but how they do things is very, very different.
Absolutely.
So you can't go into. It's like going into a new relationship with your old baggage. You can't do that. You've got to start fresh. Start again. So I've had to build my team here, restructure some of the things, and now we're in a really good space in this business. So I'm forever grateful that I have these opportunities to do such things. But yeah, so my focus nowadays is more on how do I develop my people so that whether I'm here or I'm not, they know what is the future culture that they need to develop, right? So, and a lot of the guys that I have, whether I've worked with them before or they're fresh to the industry, that responsibility really does lie at the top of the food chain. What is the culture that we set? What are the expectations that we set? And Michael Solomon and I actually had this conversation about, how do we make the industry better overall, right? Because, everybody has a different way that they can impact it. But I've realized, the way that I can impact it is through each of my individual employees. So, I can only impact my circle of influence, and that's my immediate dealership and the people that I deal with. So that's where my focus is on really trying to make sure, everybody just gets 1% better each day. They're the sorts of things that we frequently talk about in our management meetings and all that sort of stuff.
But that in many ways, you and I are talking. It's mid to late July 2020. So for those viewers playing at home, the coronavirus is out there, irrespective of when you're listening to this discussion. So, what you're talking about there with being able to affect your circle of influence. It's in many ways it's very much like the coronavirus, isn't it? If you can affect one person, then the hope is that person will affect 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people with challenging your thinking and thinking about the industry in a different way, in a different mindset. We've, as you said before, we've always been an industry that's focused on the result, the outcome, and not the lead up to it. The behaviors behind it is probably where I think obviously you're starting it, but I think that's a lesson that we've really learned the hard way over the last couple of years. It's the behaviours that contribute the strongest result at the end, and the more sustainable, consistent result at the end.
Yeah. Well, and that's another one of my my common sayings with my team is consistency over intensity. I guess that analogy comes from an exercise perspective. So if you go to the gym and you go and wreck yourself, the chances of you making it back to the gym when you've got delayed onset muscle syndrome,
Yes.
and you're so sore that you can't even walk, is very minimal. But if I'm just getting started and let's say I only go to 70% of my capacity, that actually motivates me to want to come back the next day and maybe push it to 75, right? it's impossible to always, flatline. You don't want to be the same the whole way through. But if I can vary my intensity, but always stay between a range of say 70 to 105, I'm going to get a better result overall. I'm going to be happier. I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to be more stable because, that's something that's a very hard thing for people in the industry is to, when you're committing so much of your time, for guys who, my guys are on an 11-day fortnight roster. So when you think about that, you get 1.5 days off a week, right? So, and then if you don't structure it the right way, you might go 12 days before you have your 1.5 days off, type thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So, that's where it really becomes important that we, we take away that sort of focus on the intensity aspect of it. So, irrespective of whether it's end of month or it's not, we need to have that consistency on a weekly basis. And if the guys focus on that, then they'll try and work around that as well. Of course, there's situations where, sometimes it can't be helped, but it's not every month that always ends up on your days off, right? So, but if we have that consistency in their time off, they're going to be more consistent when they're at work as well. So, when we look at the peaks and troughs, I don't want the peaks and troughs to just average out and just be a flat line. I want the peaks to be a little bit higher and the troughs to be a little bit lower, and then slowly it's just like sort of on the upward sort of incline. So that's the sort of approach that we try and take.
Absolutely, yeah. In my line of work, Johnny, as you know, I talk to people all day, every day. A lot of it's about changing. A lot of it's about their careers and changing pathways, getting to know them and their characteristics. And I think my assistant the other day tried to figure out actually how many people that I've sat down and met with to talk about their to talk about their roles and their job and what they want to do. And the figure she came up with was somewhere in between 9,000 to 10,000 interviews.
Wow.
So, so if practice says anything, I'm fairly well practiced at this thing now. But one thing that I've learned in the past, though, is that we're all byproducts of our experiences, and DNA counts for a certain portion of who we are, but experience and behaviours counts for a hell of a lot as well. And a lot of people that have that exposure in their lifetime to things like martial arts become very disciplined at other parts of their lives as well. I think you touched on this before. It's a kind of thing that you practice and permeates through all areas of your life in a way.
It's translation of skills. I think I think in one of my podcasts, I think Ben was asking me about, Ben Hall was asking me about it, and just asked me, what do I think my strength is, and I think that's what my strength is. My strength is taking the experiences that I've had and trying to shape my perspective on it so that I can apply it to a future experience, so something that hasn't happened yet. And one of the other things that, when I was listening to, I think it was the Joe Rogan podcast, and they were talking about the concept of how big infinity is, right? And so basically, the concept of how big infinity is that there's a likelihood that there is another you and I having this exact same conversation in another universe. There's a likelihood that there's another you and I with the roles reversed having the exact same conversation, or the reverse conversation in another universe. Yeah. And I use that to in a very odd way, where sometimes when you have a really messed up thought, like, one of those things that's politically incorrect, you shouldn't say it, you can think it, but, you might give yourself a little bit of a chuckle. Sometimes I take that to the nth degree, and then I go, okay, in some universe out there, I could be that bad guy, right? Or I could be that horrible person or say this horrible thing. It doesn't need to be in this one.
No.
Right? So I use that to actually try and encourage myself to be the bigger person and the better person in every single circumstance, right? So, so the same thing applies, like, when we talk about, so as an example, like I'll give you a good example, where one of my staff members, we were talking about pay plans, commission plans, and he was asking, can we look at some sort of an adjustment for something? And so, he's one of my managers, and so, excuse me. So I thought about it, and so what I actually said to him was, look, you know, you're one of my senior managers. You know, at some point, I know that you want to grow and develop yourself as well. So one day you're going to have similar questions coming from your managers asking you for the same thing. So, you know, I put a lot of thought into the structures that I put together, but perhaps there might be a better way. So if you can show me a better way and show me what are the pros and the cons, and come up with a solution that's better for both parties, I'm happy to explore it. So, you know, whereas I think, you know, I think everybody's first reaction would have just been like, no.
Yeah.
Right?
What's the old school reaction is, oh, he wants a pay rise, does he? Just tell him to sell more cars.
Yeah. Right. So, but you know, I might miss out on a great idea. Now, there's no guarantee that I'm going to take on board whatever is, you know, put forward. But at least the option is there, and I think it's a good learning activity for him as well to work out. Okay, I've got to now think about this from both perspectives. I've got to think about it from the business perspective. I've got to think about it from my personal perspective. So when you start to think about it like that, it becomes very hard to find that middle ground that's going to work best for both parties. But I think every person in a management capacity in the automotive industry has to go through that, right? If they want to have a successful career, you have to have that ability to consider both sides. If you're too much on one side, like when I was at AHG and so focused on the result, I was too much on that side and I didn't focus enough on my people, right?
Yes.
And if I was too much on the people and I let whatever happened with the result happen, then that wouldn't be the best outcome for the business either. So, you know, finding that middle ground.
Yeah, that's what leadership is always. It always has and probably always will be about balance in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, like our industry has very much been an industry that has been very dictatorial or directive style of management with how we've led people. You know, like people come to their leaders for an answer.
Yeah.
Where, you know, that scenario that you just spoke through about, you know, empowering the person to come up with a solution or at least come up with a plan. It's not just about formulating a play plan. It's the knock-on effect that you gain as a leader out of that conversation is that person walking away from that conversation going, wow, Johnny trusts me to come up with a solution. Johnny values my opinion. There's you know, in a world where we measure our engagement with our customers 24/7, we don't necessarily focus on that with our people. We feel that a pay packet is engagement enough, and it's, you know, it's not. I would say to you, I think any statistics you read, pay and all of those things actually isn't even remotely even the top 5 for the reason why people stay connected to you as a business and a manager.
Yeah. So, communities, I think one of the things that we forge when we're in these automotive businesses, and this is, I guess this will sort of explain a little bit why I'm a bit, you know, enigmatic on in terms of LinkedIn and social media and things like that. So, you know, I guess when we think about, you know, community, so whether you know, whatever hobby you're into, generally you find other like-minded people, right?
Yes.
So, you know, in when religion was a big thing, then obviously people would gather for religious reasons and go to church and have a community based around church, right? And you get an eclectic group of people that come from all walks of life that you talk to as a human being, right? And then likewise, you know, if it's martial arts or team sport or anything like that, you know, or CrossFit or whatever sort of, you know, exercise, you can bring together, you find your own little niche and community there, and you get exposure to all these different people and from all different walks of life. So likewise, you know, just because we view what we do as work, it shouldn't be any different. You know, I've got people from all different walks of life in my business who are interested in all different things. The thing that binds us together is that we're in the automotive industry. So, you know, we can't make it all about work. I think those days are gone where, you know, if we make it all about work, that's why you have people burnt out.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
They're not pursuing these other passion projects and things like that. So I guess, you know, to be honest, I'm not a good marketer. Okay, I don't market my podcast very well, because I guess that's time consuming in itself. And this
Yes.
is where I'm going to contradict myself, because I do have other areas that I prefer to focus on as opposed to marketing my podcast. I'd rather just have quality conversations and let the conversations carry themselves. But from the reason why I started that podcast in the first place, there was two reasons. One, I had a friend of mine from high school, Adrian, commit suicide. So that was just after Easter last year. We had actually had dinner at a mate's place on Easter Monday, and 5 days later, I find out that he's jumped in front of a train and killed himself at Homebush Station.
Yeah, nuts.
And you go through a whole bunch of different emotions when that sort of happens. And this is a guy who, scored 99.95 on his HSC, was a mathematics genius type thing. Could have had plenty of job offers and all that sort of stuff. Was doing actuary and all that sort of stuff. And he had his own reasons, obviously, for doing that. And as long as I hope, as long as he's in a better place now, that's all that matters from that perspective.
Yeah.
But that made me take stock of things from that perspective. And then the other sort of catalyst for me starting my own podcast was that I've got 2 children, soon to be 3. I've got another one due in January, and watching them grow up, I would see them do things. And I'd go, and as we were talking about it before, your experiences, form part of your DNA. I'd look at some of the things that they do and I go, where the hell did they get that from? They picked it up from somewhere, whether it's something that I've done or, it's just, something inbuilt from mum and dad's experiences that have been passed on to them. And I actually started to realize that, I didn't know very much about my own family's history. My dad's always loved to tell me stories, but I've never liked to listen. I had a very strained relationship with my dad for many years, and I guess I started to think that I didn't really care about my family history or anything like that until the day that I did. And so when I first started the podcasting thing, it was the main reason for it was to actually just have a conversation with my dad and record that down. So I got that done in the third podcast. And then, I guess why I've still done the podcast is because I've had, people when we talk about it or we talk about things, and then we have these really fantastic conversations because, as I was saying before about when it comes to relationships, what you give is what you get. And if I'm open and honest and transparent, I think that makes people feel calm and at ease to also share those things with me. And so I've just been fortunate that I've had people that have been willing to share those things on my podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's sort of, how I guess what happened with, the podcast and why I started it. Again, I'm not a good marketer. I'm not good at chasing people to put together and those sorts of things. So my momentum's probably stalled a little bit. But if I can have a nice, genuine conversation with someone, that's really all I'm looking for. And if anything, then it gives somebody a place, a time capsule, so that maybe one day their kids might want to listen to a bit more about who their parents were when they were, children or whatever. And it's just there. So, I know that my kids probably won't listen to it. They might not listen to it for 40 years, 50 years, whatever. But the day that they do decide that they want to understand more about who Dad was when he was, in his career and those sorts of things, at least they have that opportunity to do so. I think, that's a gift that, I can, doesn't, all it takes is some time, and so it's an investment that I'm willing to do from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got we've got so many great tools available to us these days that allows us to record our history in a way, and I like you. I think when you when you grow up, you are focused on self-interest. You know, it's all about what's in it for me, what's in it for me, what's in it for me.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're fortunate enough to become a parent, father, mother, you you start to realize what your parents have done for you and the legacy that they've made, and you know, because you're starting to build your own legacy. And I think recording is such a great way of trying to give a snapshot into the people that you're talking to. You know, in what I do for outside of this podcast, you know, I build relationships with people that when we get to the end of it, I'm sure a lot of the people that I chat to go, I never thought I would be talking about that. That wasn't a job interview. It felt like a podcast, you know, like it felt like a therapy session. It's a conversation. And that for me is when you get someone to that level of authenticity, that's when you really get to know the person on the other end of the conversation. You know, a job interview doesn't give you that insight.
No, absolutely not. So how did you end up in automotive talent anyway? So you mentioned obviously you grew up in a Ford dealership. And so what happened from there?
Long story short, I'm a 43-year-old son of a Ford dealer who was the son of a Ford dealer. So
it's in the family.
Yeah, the DNA was damaged many moons ago. And I, you know, from conception through to now, I've always been in the automotive industry. I have done different pathways. Obviously, our family, we're not Ford dealers anymore. The old man saw the light and had an offer that he couldn't refuse and walked away from the business and ruined the legacy for me to take over. And at the time, maybe I wasn't so impressed with that decision. But
how old were you when that decision was made?
Mid-20s. Yeah, mid-20s. Yeah.
So you were working in the business at that time?
Yeah, working my way through it. Yeah, I started started same as you, swinging spanners. So
on the tools. Yep.
Yeah, but you know, for me, I started automotive talent because I felt there was something missing. Like I felt, you know, for me, I never wanted this business to be like any other business. I didn't want it to be you know, change the logo, change the business name, and you do things exactly the way as everyone else does.
Yep.
I wanted this business to be a business that really focused on building the relationships with people and adding value through those relationships and partnering, you know. And, you know, the reality is you could be the world's greatest Toyota technician or BMW technician or whatever, and you've got skill set that's undeniable, but if you personality wise don't fit the environment that you're about to walk into, then there's no point having that skill set. And you know, for me, people succeeding or not succeeding in our world is always been more about the personality alignment than skill set. And you know, the old adage always comes through for me: find the will, teach the skill. Is something that our industry is probably we've only ever been really focused on results, haven't we? You know, think back to the day. You know, if you've got a need for a salesperson, you say, I'm looking for a salesperson, experience required.
Yeah.
You know, where, you know, we really, you know, because we didn't back in the day, we didn't really want to train, we didn't really want to coach, we wanted a solution, and we wanted it now.
Yeah.
Where the more sustainable one is the one that we put effort into.
Yeah. Well, isn't that, I think that's funny because, you know, when you think about people who end up in management roles are generally the long-serving guy or the guy with the best results, right?
The last man standing.
Yeah. And so, you know, you put this person into that management capacity, yet we don't spend any time training them on how to be a manager, right? And I think that's a consistent theme across our industry. You know, I think nowadays we still sort of, you know, we sort of just say, oh, you know, here, go and do this course or go and do that course, and you think, you know, she'll be right, and away you go. But there is so much more to being an effective leader and an effective manager than I think people really appreciate. And I say this to my managers. Part of the reason why I love teaching them everything that I know is because if I run out of things to teach, then I need to go learn more myself, right? So it sort of keeps me on my toes to keep developing myself, drawing from inspirations from different aspects of the world. Good coaching is good coaching, whether it's applicable to basketball, it's applicable to, team sport, AFL, whatever, soccer, you name it. Good coaching is still going to be good coaching. And I think, how does good coaching come about? Well, it comes about through being refined, right? It goes through this process of, we talk about, I guess, the common one that we always talk about in when you go to any sort of management training, they'll talk about, the steps to conscious competence, that yes. You start off as unconsciously incompetent because you don't know what you don't know. Then, you become consciously incompetent because you start to realize just how much you don't know. Then you find a way to make it work, but you don't know why it's working, so you're unconsciously competent. And then, then you try and get yourself to this point where you actually know why it all gets work together and how to influence it, and that's a conscious competence sort of phase. So I think, anybody in our industry can learn from other industries and pull in those sorts of, especially the language, the linguistics, the terms that we use. I think, it's almost like if we don't update the language that we use, it's like, going into a battle with old technology. It's the same thing. So likewise today, there's so many good resources available, and a large proportion of them are free. There are guys out there like Gary Vaynerchuk who give away their best shit for free because they don't care that other people listen to it. If they're actually happy, because that's the only way to get development. In martial arts, I can't get better if my training partners aren't as good, right? I have to bring them along the journey because, some steps you can only learn when you've got a solid foundation that you've built on. So, yes. The goal in all our businesses, irrespective that we might be competing against each other or not, is for the industry as a whole to actually get, build on that foundation and get better and better and better. In the meantime, it becomes my competitive advantage, from that perspective. If people aren't thinking the same way that I am, and then, there are staff out there that want to go into the system that I'm trying to put together, well, that's my competitive advantage, and I get to develop those people and try and grow from that perspective.
Absolutely. But that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges of our industry, and we have covered, I've brought this up in previous episodes, but the industry, if you went to anyone outside of the automotive industry and did a vox pop type discussion with people walking past on the street, not that people are allowed out in Victoria at the moment, but everywhere else they are. Yep. If you said, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the automotive industry, and gave them the microphone, I'm sure we would probably we won't be surprised, but we wouldn't be impressed by their result, by what they say, Yeah. And the biggest challenge of the industry at the moment is the ability for us to attract people that could have been a doctor or a lawyer or a whatever to it. In many ways, it's because it's such a beautiful industry. It is an industry that is, it's no other. I can't think of any other industry that's kind of as dynamic as what the automotive industry is, and that's a part of its romantic charms. Yet, there's only three ways that people come into our industry. The first one is you're born into it. The second one is you've got a burning desire to be a mechanic, perhaps, and getting that trade behind you. The third part, and it's probably the most common, is that you trip and fall over it, and the next thing you know, it's held you captive for the rest of your days. Where I think if and part of the reason for doing this podcast is exactly what you said before. You know, I think we're a much better industry when we work together.
Mm.
We're a much better industry when we're not competing with the dealership that's down the road. When we're trying to collectively make the business, the industry, the best version of itself that it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where it's interesting, you know, when you say that. Like even if we just think about, you know, the differences between corporate and retail, right? So a lot of the times, you know, in corporate, you'll have guys that will get into roles. You know, they'll spend say 3 to 5 years of tenure in a specific role, and you know, the future of their career is decided upon how well they performed over those 3 to 5 years. So sometimes the decisions that they make are for the benefit of achieving those 3 to 5 year results, but may not be for the longevity of the business.
Yes.
You know? So that's where, you know, there's always that sort of, I guess, that contradiction between, you know, what the manufacturers may want versus what the dealers want. You know, if you're a dealer with a long-term investment, you know, a huge amount of overheads, you're not thinking about 3 to 5 years. You're thinking about you know, how to get the most out of your investment for the next 10, 20 years. So that's, you know, something that I think, you know, is always a bit of a contradiction. And, you know, you being in automotive talent, you deal with a lot of those guys from both ends, right? Both in retail and in corporate who have those different experiences. But, you know, they're geared towards that certain pathway of, you know, okay, well, I need to get the best result, you know, in that short amount of time, because that's going to improve my value and my worth. It's a very hard place to get to for someone to almost not have that, I don't know, care factor is not the right word, but not have that, I guess it is sort of the right word, but the care factor in terms of, you know, what people's expectations are. And I'll give you a good example. You know, like people would probably think I'm a little bit eccentric. You know, my first day here at MacArthur BMW, I had a half Bosa ball, a standing table set up, and I came in and I rejigged my whole office. I pretty much, you know, rejigged half the dealership over the first month. And now my office doesn't have a formal desk. Like I've got a meeting table and I've got a standing desk. And people come in and they'll be like, don't you sit? And I'm like, generally, no. But, you know, I know that for me, if that was me, say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to be able to do the things that made me happy from that perspective. It sounds small, right? But the pressure of expectation, right? That
yes,
because the previous people have all done it this way, that's how it has to be done. And I've only found that confidence in, you know, I wish I had that confidence in myself early, because I think, you know, my results probably would have been a leap ahead again. Like I say this to my guys all the time. If I had the knowledge that I had now, if it was 10 years ago, well, there's probably a good chance that I probably wouldn't have listened to myself anyway, because I was driven by ego, right? Yeah. But on the flip side, you know, I you know, it's a great opportunity for these guys who are learning from me to fast track their careers, and if they take on board those learnings, well, who knows where they're going to end up, you know, in 5 or 10 years. So,
yeah, absolutely. We get very narrow-minded, don't we? Like we only, you know, because we obviously only have our experiences to draw on. It's like a horse running in a horse race with a pair of blinkers on. Like it can't see outside of it. And I think in many ways the industry is, you know, people think about disruptive influences, you know, to the car industry, you know, like your subscriptions and your ride share and all of that sort of stuff. Those things I suppose are capable of being disruptors because we don't want to see them coming in a way. You know, we want to keep doing what we've always done, you know. Customers aren't buying cars now like they've always done them, you know. Customers are pushing back against our sales process because they know it and they don't want to do it anymore. They don't want to be wheeled in front of the aftermarket salesperson necessarily. They don't want to spend 6 hours in a dealership. They want us to gravitate to how they want to do it.
Yeah, well, the reality is they want to be treated like human beings, right? Yeah. They want to have a genuine experience.
Yeah.
They want to be able to connect with who's selling them the product. Now, I know that's not every customer. Like there is a proportion of customers that don't care about any of that. And that's where I guess going back to why I'm not a big proponent of social media from that perspective is because I just don't feel like you're going to be able to generate any sort of genuine connection with somebody versus actually having that sit down, that call it old school if you will, but that as much as we shouldn't be shaking hands, like I miss shaking hands.
Yeah, yeah, isn't it awkward? I hate that. It's an awkward. You look them in the eye. Do you want to? Do you don't want to? It's a real funny thing at the moment.
Question for you: do you feel like the way that we hire people in the automotive industry has changed over throughout your time at Automotive Talent?
I think it's one of those. The way we hire people, I think in general, has been an evolution. I think the good organisations, well, the best organisations out there, of course, are using businesses like ours. But you think back to 20 years ago, Seek didn't exist 20 years ago. So, if you wanted to look at a job opportunity, you had to wait for the newspaper on Wednesday or a Saturday.
Yeah.
Where now and then obviously things like Seek and other job boards came along, and the information was available to everyone 24 hours, 7 days a week. But you would say now that that's actually not effective really anymore, and I could say at this point in time right now in the predicament we're going through, like no one's actually applying for jobs at the moment, which
really?
Counterintuitively you would think that with everything going on that there's people that have been made redundant, they've been done this, they've done that. I could say the applications for roles have never been as low as what I've seen them right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think and look, my thinking on it is maybe people are they might be happy, they might not be happy, but people are staying. They're staying. There's so many variables going on in the world at the moment that maybe they want to keep something consistent. Because I think the lesson we've learnt out of this whole pandemic exercise is that you can't predict what's going to happen next week or next month, let alone tomorrow. So yeah, but it's an interesting byproduct, and everyone I say that to go, oh, I actually would have thought it would have been the opposite,
Yeah.
But yeah, and I would say that the higher you go up, like as far as accountability, the thinner it is, the thinner on the ground it is. Okay. So yeah, I wouldn't have predicted that, and I don't think anyone else could have either.
And how did it all start? Like, what was the genesis of Automotive Talent?
For me, I wanted to do this whole, and I don't even like using the word recruitment, because for me it's the same as running your fingers down the blackboard. But I wanted to do this people thing differently. In my time, I had experiences as a client, someone that signed off invoices for, businesses that recruited for the industry and also outside of it. And for me, I felt it was like a paperwork shuffling service. It was a transaction.
Yeah.
And for me, people have never been a transaction. And we've covered it off even today. When you have a relationship with someone and you give to that relationship, you give. If your mentality, and I think this is what we do, what I do, and what our business does. If we give to that relationship irrespective of the outcome, so whether you financially benefit from that or not, that for me is putting enough good karma out there that when the train pulls back into the station, you you've contributed and you've done something good. And and a lot of the time, yeah, look, obviously as a business, that's the value that we add, and the clients that work with us, I think, really get that about what we do. And sometimes they actually say we're too romantically involved in our candidates and stuff. But for me, I don't think that's a bad thing. At the end of the day, our business is charged with lining up personalities as well as skill sets, as well as experiences. And it's more than just it's more than a CV. It's more than a psychometric test. It's more than there's more to people than that.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious about this because I guess the way that I like to always provide people with opportunities is to actually get them to work a day in the business as a trial and see what their fit is like. It's not something that happens in corporate. It doesn't happen in majority of probably automotive places.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think it would be a good way for the people to try the automotive industry?
I think for me, the way we bring people into the business and the industry is probably going to be the greatest determining factor of whether that person's going to be successful or not at the other end of it. Like, you only got to think of your own story to get that determination. If you think back to the day, you bring someone in and you go, all right, there's your desk, there's your phone. The business cards, they're the old guy's business cards. Just cross out his name and write your name on it and phone number, and you'll get your logins for the computer in a couple of days, and it turns out to be 3 weeks. Statistically, a person decides to move on from a role. I think it's 92% of the time, a person will move on from an employer. Well, at least if they leave that employment in the first 6 months, 92% of the time that decision is made in the first 72 hours of their employment.
Really? Yep, in the first 3 days.
Yeah. So how you onboard someone, how you bring someone into your environment,
Yep.
How you bring someone into your environment gives you the person the greatest chance of retaining that person in the business. And the reason you say to a candidate or a person, hey, we've spoken to people and you're the person that we want, inevitably someone has thought that about all of us over our journey, hasn't it? And by not introducing someone into the environment in a way that I suppose drives that relationship and connection, by not doing it, we're setting them up to fail.
And I guess, do you do any research in terms of why people leave their current employers?
Absolutely.
But what are the sort of common themes that you find? Like, is it related to in workplace environment? Is it management? Is it people? Because I was always a big proponent that people don't leave companies because companies are actually people. They leave people. That we haven't, it could be sometimes that we haven't provided the right framework or development for that individual. We might have the right opportunity. Or alternatively, on the opposite end is that, that person wasn't the right fit for our business. But what do you find what do the stats sort of say for you guys?
I think it's around about 72 or 73% of the time a person will move on from a business because of the person that they report to.
Yeah.
More than 3/4 of the time.
Yeah.
Although the reason they might give is something along the lines of, hey, I'm going down the road and they're paying me this, or, this is the reality is, there's always a reason why someone disconnects from you as a manager.
Yeah.
And, coming back to what we were talking about, the way people recruit, like, you think about the days pre-internet where you had the newspaper ads. If as a manager, if you disconnected from someone on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, for example,
Yeah.
You know, you had a couple of days to repair that damage with the person. Where nowadays, do you remember there was an old Seek ad that Seek did a TV ad. It's probably about 10 years ago now. There was an ad. There was an ad when they just went to their mobile app, and there was an ad where I think it was a tradesman was grabbed his phone, went into the toilet, and started using the Seek ad applying for jobs.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
It sounds familiar. Yep.
Yeah. So for me, when the thing about today is that you could have if you have a conversation or if you disconnect from someone at any point in time in your business now, 24 hours, 7 days a week, that person has the ability to look for their next job right then and there.
Yep.
So, the want to be connected to your people and to be engaged with your people and then being engaged with you has never been so important, even though it's always been important. It's never been so important as right now. But more often than not, it's generally the person that they report to as the reasons why they get disconnected to begin with, and then start looking at other opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay. And then I think I was just thinking about this, like the other thing I think as an industry we don't do well is, so as an example, let's say we have an entry-level employee, whether it's an apprentice or a parts interpreter or a salesperson, right? Like, so one of those, or even let's say receptionist or something like that. I think one of the things that we don't do well across the industry is we don't provide that person with opportunities to actually experience the other departments in the business. We sort of pigeonhole people from the get-go that, if you start in service, well, then the likely transition is going to be from apprentice to mechanic to maybe a service advisor. And then, before you know it, they're a service manager who has had, zero experience in terms of sales.
Yes.
I think, that sort of holistic experience is very difficult to find. So I had the reverse. Obviously I was fortunate enough to start in the service business, and I was fortunate enough to get that corporate experience, and through corporate that exposed me to a whole bunch of different departments. So that when I came back out to the dealerships, I think one of the other reasons why I became more effective, at when I was at Mercedes versus Holden, was that I did take that step back and made sure that I mastered the craft of selling.
Yes.
I think without that step, I probably wouldn't be as good of an operator now, because it was always one of those things that I think when you have that in your own mind, you might actually have the ability, but in your mind, you still treat it as like it's a chink in your armor, and you want to do everything to overcompensate for that.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how we address that, as an industry, because obviously pay plans and all that sort of stuff is different. But have you ever, do you come across many candidates who turn around and say, look, I've had experience in this department, but I really want to get into this area?
Absolutely. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I think there's, I think one thing that Toyota, and you've experienced this yourself, Toyota corporate are very good at, saying, okay, this is your job now.
Yep.
But it's only going to last for 2 years, and then we're going to move you on. We don't care whether you want to move or not. You're moving on. So it is kind of factored in the DNA of the business from the outset, isn't it? Your customer experience people jump to sales, and then they jump to product planning, and then they might, all over the place.
Yeah.
I think at a dealership level, it's, I think the great businesses have the strongest connection to their people from what they want to do. Normally I think in a retail, if you're thinking about a stereotypical dealership environment, does every business out there do performance appraisals for their people? Is there a formalized structure that they sit down once every 12 months, once every 6 months? Some don't do that at all. And then the businesses that are a little bit more maybe corporate and do it and perform these tasks, are they done because they have to, or done because they want to?
Yeah.
You know, there needs to be that authenticity. I think for me, having a relationship and getting to understand what your people want to do is something that you can't talk about once or twice a year. It's got to be more often than that. And it doesn't have to be a formal conversation. It can be sitting around your meeting room sharing a cup of tea. It doesn't. It needs to be that real situational, ongoing type of conversation. But I've got a client of mine that that's got a great onboarding system for their dealership, and they've got basically a 6-week program, irrespective of what you're doing and who you are. They put everyone through the same program where there's a formalized onboarding process. You know, you sit in, you spend time with the leaders of the business, you get an understanding of what the business is all about. But there's a 6-week plan where, you know, if that person is hired as a salesperson, they don't go to the sales floor. They go spend time in the service department and getting a feel for that. They go spend time in admin. They go to accounts. They go to PD. They experience other departments so that they can really get their eye in, and then eventually they'll get to sit in their sales chair, because, you know, they want the business to be a complete holistic business, and not not silos within these organizations. And that's, you know, if you think back to the day, that was, you know, it was always a sales versus service versus parts versus admin battle of the fittest, you know?
That's right. Who had the biggest personality?
Who can yell the loudest and the longest? But it takes the village to raise the child these days, isn't it? You know, when you think about net return on businesses, you know, being in very low single digits, you don't have to be too far off your game. To be you know, having a better you know, most of the time I think at the moment you have a better return if you had the money in the bank anyway, but that's not the way we look at it, is it? So it's an interesting environment, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I always whenever I talk about, you know, dealership culture, you know, I always love talking about the 5 monkeys, the 5 monkeys in the cage. You know, you hang the bananas at the top and put a ladder in there, and then whenever any of the monkeys go for the bananas, they all get sprayed with the water cannon until they all stop going for it. And then you know, they replace one of the monkeys, and this monkey gets in the cage and he looks at the other 4 monkeys and he goes, "Look at these idiots! I'm gonna go get them bananas." And then he tries to climb up and get the bananas, and the rest of the other 4 monkeys pull him down until he gives up. And they go through and they start replacing the next monkey and the next monkey and the next monkey until 4 or 5 monkeys are in there. None of them go for the bananas, but none of them know why.
Do you think? And you know, I've been you know, beating the drum over for a long time now, is that I think for the industry needs to change, we need to change. You know, and I think, you know, for me, I would suggest that we would have a different outcome where, at a starting point, if we remunerated our people differently, we would drive a different outcome. You know, right now the stereotypical model is an if and then model, isn't it? If you do this, then you get this. Where that drives a particular behaviour pathway. But I would say you could argue that behaviour pathway isn't right.
Well, it's valuing you're valuing the result over everything else, right? One of the things that I picked up from watching another guy's management videos was he was talking about, you know, how he sort of looks at his employees and ranks them based on 3 things. He looks at them, you know, how loyal are they to him and his cause? You know, how do they work with their colleagues, and I guess what their level of harmony in the workplace is. And then the third thing is the result. And, you know, the guys that have all 3, if they're loyal to your cause, they work well in a team and they get you the result, well, they're the guys that you have flagged for, you know, as your future leaders of that business. generally, the guys who only have two, well, if the guy's loyal, he works well in a team, but he doesn't get you a result, well, chances are he's in the wrong spot, right? If he's loyal and he gets you a result, but he doesn't work well with others, well, he's not going to be able to ever command a team, right? He's just going to be your trooper on the floor. If he works well in a team and he gets you a result, but he's not loyal, well, the moment he gets a better offer, he's going to be out the door.
Yeah.
Right. So I really like that because it gives me a different way to sort of cut my employees and have a look at my employees and go, okay, how do you stack up against these criteria? What's my direction for this person? How do I get the most out of this person? Make them feel like they're getting the most out of themselves as well. Because we've all heard it before. We don't come to work to do a shit job. We come to work to enjoy ourselves. Get a great result.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Our roles as, I guess, leaders in the automotive industry is to be the enablers of that. Make it as easy as possible for those people and remove some of those roadblocks. That's how I view it.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually, I think it's very insightful. I couldn't have put it better myself. I think, as you say, inevitably people, when your team member jumps out of bed in the morning, they're thinking that they don't want to jump, they don't want to go, they don't want to go to work and do a bad job by Johnny.
No.
They want to do the best. They want to be the best version of themselves that they can be and get the best result for you and the business.
Yeah.
So, when someone disconnects, when the day comes when someone disconnects from you and they start thinking that's the day they start looking for other opportunities and moving on to other pastures. So
yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
What do you want your legacy to be? I think we've covered a little bit of this off, but ultimately, if you encapsulate it into a nutshell, what would you like your legacy to be in this? Obviously, from a professional viewpoint, anyway. What would you like? What would you like them to eulogize about you, Johnny?
I don't really think about that. I think at the end of the day, your legacy is what you leave with other people. So if you were, I've never really thought about, the day that I'm not here, what do I want people to say about me? I actually, honestly, I've never really pondered it for any particular length of time. I think that the reason for that is because, going back to, when I started at HG, I had this goal in my head that I wanted to be a DP. And I thought, I'll be at HG for about 4 years before I get that opportunity. I'll be 32. I had this idea painted in my head that this was the way it was going to be. And then when I got that opportunity and Chad gave me that opportunity, I actually was lost. I remember saying it to my now wife, but my girlfriend at the time. It's like, I didn't think I would get there for another 4 years, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
And then I felt like, it almost sounds horrible to say, but did I sell myself short? Because I didn't, all throughout my career up until that point, I always had an idea what the next step was. And then it was almost scary because for the first time in my life, I didn't know what the next step was. And so now I've sort of come to this point where I don't know what the next step is. To be honest, it doesn't bother me, right? I actually just want to enjoy the journey. I come to work every day, invest in my people, invested in the business, because I'm actually, I'm passionate about it. I'm enjoying it, and there has been times in my career, and I think everybody can attest to there's been times in your career where you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the days that, when I think back on those days, I go, well, yeah, I might not have enjoyed it because of the people or the conditions or whatever the case may be. So, you've got a conscious decision to make. The conscious decision is, well, if you're not enjoying it, well, then chances are you shouldn't be doing it, right? Because, life's short. Some people, cut their lives short. And as a result of that, I don't want to spend days doing things that I don't enjoy. And so if anything, then I guess, I'm just going to stay focused on doing the best that I can day in, day out to enjoy myself, have a bit of fun, help as many people as I can. And whatever happens anyway after, it doesn't really matter to me because I'm gone.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think ultimately, I think for me, it's about being happy in yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Happiness isn't defined by a job title or a remuneration package or, anything else. It's about being comfortable in yourself, knowing that you've added to people over the time, and when it is your time to move on, whether it's physically or metaphorically, it was the environment or the world was a better place for you being there, and you were happy when you were doing it.
Yeah, well, and that's right. So, I think people should be chasing the things that they want to chase, right? Doesn't mean that it has to take away from something else, right? Just because I'm still ultimately passionate about martial arts, but just because I'm passionate about martial arts doesn't mean that has to take away from my passion for the automotive industry. Yeah. You can have your cake and eat it too. That might mean that I sacrifice in other aspects of my life to get what I want out of those things. But at the end of the day, only you as the individual can decide which sacrifices are worth it. But if it's not worth sacrificing something for, then it's not worth doing. So,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, Johnny, I've really enjoyed. I was looking forward to this conversation, and I can say, mate, you didn't disappoint from my perspective, and hopefully you feel the same. So, thanks for your contribution, and I'm sure our listeners both are going to get a bit out of this. So, I appreciate your time, my friend.
Yep. No dramas. If people want to listen to any of my podcasts, it's I think you just got to look up Johnny Yaps. So my full name plus an S on the end. And then I'm on Instagram as well. I don't really do much apart from post podcast episodes. So so Johnny Yaps on Instagram. If you want to find me, I'm at MacArthur BMW, and I'm always looking for people.
Well, I know someone that might be able to help you out with that, Johnny.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate your time too, mate. All the best.
Thank you.